With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
Hi, my name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? Hello, and welcome to another episode of How Did That Happen? This week, we are discussing time. I'll try not to get too deep. Come along for the ride this week as I ask, time, how did that happen? Okay, so back for episode 20 of How Did That Happen? Thanks for tuning in. Wasn't sure if there'd be an episode 20 this weekend because just this morning or last night, whenever you want to count it, I came down with just the most wicked bout of food poisoning from an Asian restaurant chain, which will remain nameless. It does rhyme with Schmanda Excess. If anyone out there is curious, I like Schmanda Excess. I've been there. I haven't been there in a while, and but I used to frequent it, very often. Get the Kung Pao chicken, which is what did me in this time, but I don't know. Am I done forever? You have to tune into episode 21 to find that out. I can tell you right now, I'm probably not, but I'm definitely done for a couple weeks with that. But so that's a little bit about me that you probably wish you didn't know, and you can skip past that. But this episode is about time. And time is just so vast, and like I knew some of this stuff going in, but I don't know. It's just first off, I will say, and this will probably won't come back in to the podcast at all, but I'll just say that the time is described in three different ways. The first way is physics and philosophy, which is like time as a physical phenomenon, and then there's the psychology, which is like sensing the passing of time. And that's when I was reading this, I was like, okay, well, this is way deeper than I thought I was going to get right off the top. But then there's mathematics and engineering, and that's the time that we use to measure and like regulate our lives, which is like clocks and stuff, which is the main part of what we're going to be talking about right now, because the rest of that just seemed like for a whole nother episode or episodes upon episode. Let's see, so we'll start. The measurement of time began with the Egyptians using sundials. This was sometime before 1500 BC. The sundial was good for the daytime, but not great at nighttime. And they had to use a different way to tell time at night, of course, because it's the sundial, not the night dial. They would use the movement of the constellations through the sky to track the passage of time at night. And they even put these maps in the tombs of their dead so that the dead could tell time at night, because they thought that was going to be a big part of being dead. Early clocks that tried to measure time after dark were like the sand glass, water clocks, candle clocks. And they mainly used like the flow of a substance to measure the time. Water clocks came in many shapes and forms. I looked up a few, and it's harder than you think. You find some of the weird stuff on the internet, but it's hard to find people that are actually just like making like working ancient water clocks. But I found a couple, and one was like, it was like you filled up a large bucket and with like water, and there's a spout at the bottom, and when it's emptied out, basically the time, you can tell the time at that point, like the level of the water is the moment as that moment in time. And the candle clock works pretty similarly. The candle clock was done by watching a candle, the decline in wax as it melts down in height, and that marking is measured in a similar way that the water clock is. The Egyptians were the ones who introduced the 24-hour day to us. They like with their whole time-telling system. They set the day up to be divided into two 12-hour segments, basically one for day and one for night. This process was brought to Greece by an astronomer named Hipparchus, which I definitely didn't get that right. And from there, like most good things from Greek life, if you look at history, the Romans copied it for their own, and they took that whole 24-hour day system, and then from the Romans, that where we also get the AMs and the PMs, because they're Latin words. Ante meridiem, which is the 12 hours before midday, and then post meridiem, PM, they're the 12 hours after midday. The 60-second and the 60-minute clock that we know today comes from ideas created by the ancient Babylonians. They used a math system called sexagesimal. It's sexagesimal, right? Which means relating to the number 60. They counted all the knuckles on one hand and multiplied by the amount of fingers on the other hand, making 60. Which is interesting because I did it and it works. And it's like, oh yeah, they had the same hands. All right, so these guys had to have a hand-based counting system since no one had calculators handy, and you need something that everybody has. The Babylonians used this system to divide the hours into 60 minutes and then those minutes into 60 seconds. The Babylonians are also responsible for the creation of the 7-day week. They based their month off of one revolution of the moon around the earth, which they measured to take 28 days. So when they learned that this took 28 days, they divided those 28 days into 7-day weeks, like 4 7-day weeks, basically. And they named these days after the observable planets, which I guess was a big thing back then because basically the Romans did the same thing, but they just called them gods. But so like the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, all things you could see, from the ground if you knew what you were looking at. This is wild because if you look at this at like the Spanish language, the days of the week still use those same names as like the basis. They've just been washed through a Romance language. So you've got lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes. It's very close. And this was adopted by the Persians, the Hebrews, and the Greeks, and the Romans. Like I said, named their days after Roman gods, which were also just the names of the planets you could see from the ground. And if you're wondering where we get the names that we have today, part of it comes from that, but the middle of the week days come from when the Germanic and Nordic people got a hold of the 7-day week. Basically, they named them after their gods as well, and their gods were Odin, Thor, Frigg, and then there was another guy named Tu who sacrificed his arm to a wolf, and they loved him for that reason. Alexander the Great brought the 7-day week to India, where it would later enter China, and then basically at that point, everybody's got it then. The Romans were backwards thinking. Before they had the 7-day week, they had an 8-day week, and they named them after the alphabet, which just sounds so simple. I mean, but it's like, but the 8th day would be a market day, like a trade day, and but people in different towns had different market days because it was all based off like what you grew and stuff like that. So your market day would be like different than somebody else's, and this resulted in them thinking that basically everybody was thinking it was a different day of the week. And so they take this simple process. We're going to name, the days after letters, and everything's going to be cool, and it's not. And it's just wild because like these guys created like roads and aqueducts, but the days of the week were a doozy for them. In 321 AD, Emperor Constantine basically decreed, he said that the 7-day week would be the standard throughout the Roman Empire, and he also made the 7th day a public holiday similar to that of the Sabbath. So that's pretty much it about like the days of the week. I really kind of went into like I had written in here before. I was like, this is like, but I didn't say it. I don't think it's almost like a whole other episode, really. But I just thought I would run through it real fast just because we're talking about time. I didn't want to leave it out. But it's important to mention that before modern times, the average person didn't have access to like time measuring devices. They had to gauge it off the sun and the sky. Like I heard someone say it was like time was just like a it was like a gadget before like the last couple 100 years. Like you know what time it is, good for you. Like people didn't really care that much, I guess, or that could be wrong. But I've looked at so many different things. But like I said, the people didn't have access to it, and so later on in time, the time would be kept by the Catholic Church for like basically that same reason, because they knew that people needed time. The priests needed time because they needed to know when to pray. And because the churches were usually the only entities that had enough money to own a clock, they would ring the bells every hour to alert the townspeople at the time. And I know I've seen that in movies and stuff like that, and it still kind of happens in where I live. Is a lot of churches, and you do hear at certain times of day you hear bells every now and then. And this would continue to be the norm even as people began getting their own clocks, and towns would set the main clock or church clock according to the height of the sun in their town at midday, and everyone would set their personal watches off of that. And that means that you walked into a new town and you didn't have the right time. So in 1884, an international prime meridian conference was held in Washington, D.C., and it standardized time and divided the world longitudinally into 24 different time zones. Each zone is 1 hour different based on the time the sun was at midday in that zone. And they chose Greenwich, London, to be the starting point. And from there, 1 hour is added to the east you go, and then 1 hour subtracted from the west as you go. And that is how time happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. The Egyptians made the first sundials around 1500 BC. They also created the first 24-hour day. Babylonians created the 60-minute hour as well as the 60-second minute due to them counting every knuckle on their hands. They also made the 7-day week. People used to set their clocks by their local church until the late 1800s when the world got together in DC and decided that Greenwich, London would be ground zero for time. Things I didn't know before, and now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? Okay, so one thing that I learned was that in 1967, atomic timekeeping was created, and basically they were able to measure the length of a second by like looking at the oscillations of an atom. And so they had decided, and this was to like make it so that everyone across the whole world knew how long an actual second was, and then we could all have the exact time. And so 1 second is, let me get this right, it is 9,192,631,770 oscillations of a cesium-133 atom. So instead of saying 1 Mississippi, you just count that number that I just said right there. But yeah, once they figured that out, then they were basically able to say within within one oscillation of a cesium-133 atom, they knew exactly how long 1 second was. I did not know that. It never really occurred to me that anybody knew the exact length of a second. And that may actually be it as far as like stuff that's like specifically that I did not know before this, because everything else that I learned while I was researching this, I didn't know. So I get this whole podcast can be considered that. What I thought was interesting, what I would say, is how, and I never noticed this, and I took like 8 years of Spanish, that the days of the week in Spanish do actually mirror like the actual visible planets from Earth. The Martes, Miércoles, Jueves thing. Like I never, looking at it, I was watching this video that was explaining it, and I was like, that's wild, because it's actually true, and it makes sense because it's a pretty old language that was derived from these other languages. So that was interesting, but that's probably about it. Because like I said, I could just rehash this entire podcast, but in reality, all of it was news to me. The 7-day weeks from the Babylonians, and the fact that it comes from what they thought as 28 days for the moon to go around, the Earth. You think this stuff is arbitrary, but it's somebody actually somewhere along the line put some thought into it. And that's been another episode of How Did That Happen? I want to say thanks again for listening. Keep checking out the Twitter page to see what we post on there to go along with the corresponding episodes. I do think we may be trying to put out a website here in the next month or two. I'm not sure. That's still in the works, but until then, just keep hitting up the Twitter page and like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you can. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.
Shop the Plato's Closet Black Friday event in North Charleston and West Ashley and let the deals begin. You know Plato's Closet always has a huge selection of trendy recycled styles at amazing prices, but Black Friday deals are different. They're better. We've been holding back some of our best inventory, and you won't want to miss our Black Friday event. Save on gently used styles from Patagonia, Lululemon, Lilly Pulitzer, and hundreds of popular brands. Plato's Closet is ready to let the Black Friday deals begin. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.